Hi, everybody, and welcome back to an episode of In the Relationship Arena, where I come and chat to you about all things relationships. And I'm sharing today something that comes up in session a lot when I'm working with couples. It's about those habits and behaviors that can be unconsciously having an impact on your relationship. And there's certain behaviors that I think we're seeing more and more of. So it's true, we live in a world where we have access to so much information on each other. We can track where we are, we share on social media. It's almost as though there's no need to have a catch up with friends anymore because you can see exactly what's going on in other people's lives. But when we bring this modern way of living into relationships, my view is we start to lose something really important, which is the concept of boundaries and the concept of interdependence. So, one of the things that we now have, because of the way we live, is this feeling as though our partner could be our everything. We want them to be our best friend. We want them to be our soulmate. We want them to be the person we confide in. We want to spend all our time with them. We want to share our hobbies with them. And actually, it's really important when you move into a relationship to keep a balance. So that's one area we're going to look at, and we're going to dive into that in a moment. The other area we're going to look at is this oversharing and this almost hypervigilance that we start to see between partners and people in relationships, and how that can impact our sense of self and raise our anxiety levels in a relationship where perhaps there's no need. And the concept of interdependence, where you are able to have separate individuals choosing to come together and spend time. So let's dive in, let's get started. So often we hear about, they're my soulmate, they're my everything. And this is a lovely, lovely concept. But one person, in my view, cannot be someone's everything. And that's a huge amount of pressure to put on a relationship. It's so important to keep cultivating your independence. When you first meet somebody, you can be consumed with those feelings. There's infatuation, there's lust, there's attraction, there's interest. You want to spend time getting to know each other. There's many questions to be asked and explored. So many activities that will be new activities for you to do together. So it's easy to become one of those couples that becomes a little bit distant and withdrawn from those previous friendships and previous relationships that you had. And that happens to so many people. There's nothing wrong with that. That is that wonderful part of newness in a relationship that's so exciting. You can't wait to see them again. You can't wait to spend time with them. And you want to devote time to the relationship. And I'm all for that. But what happens when things start to calm down a bit? What happens when you start to lead a life together? When you start to fall into a routine? Then it's really important that you look around and you realize that one person, as I say, cannot be and should not be your everything. You will have, if you think about your friendship groups, you will have different friends that serve different purposes, and you will be a friend in different ways to different people. Some of the friends that you go straight to when you need to check something or you're in crisis. Other are friends that you love to spend time with socially that make you laugh. There are people that you do certain activities and hobbies with, but maybe they are not part of your world in other ways. Maybe you have different friendship groups. Do they overlap? That's not always the case. That's healthy. And yet here you have your partner and you want them to be able to provide everything to you, from the intimacy to the emotional support to the physical activity support. And this can put pressure on people because your partner, just like your friends, will have different skills and different things they can bring to the party. And it's important to think that you can look outside of the relationship, and interestingly, so can they. It's important to encourage them to have individual time. Creating a space between you doesn't mean there's a problem. In fact, it's a really healthy approach. So the first thing I want you to think about is, what is the balance that we have nowadays in this modern world? Now, I understand some people, they move away due to work, they don't have their family around them, but are you putting so much pressure on your partner that it's causing difficulty? Because they can't give you everything, and you wouldn't expect everything from someone else. So being appreciative of what they do bring to the party and ensuring that you've got other people in your life that can bring other needs to you, it's really, really important. I mentioned about interdependence. Interdependence is that ability for two people to live separate lives, but choose to come together and connect. And you can be living together, you can be married. Interdependence is really important. The opposite of interdependence is codependence. Now, we're going to do a whole episode on codependence, because codependency is something that needs support to work through. It can create a very toxic environment. It can lead to jealousy. It can lead to sabotage. It can lead to very difficult emotions coming up on both sides, where people, because of their past lived experiences and their attachment, things that they've gone through, both parties find it difficult to break unhealthy cycles. Interdependency is where you see your partner for all the great things that they are, but you also see yourself as an individual, and they do the same. So they don't mind when you go out with your mates. They don't mind if you have a hobby that you do by yourself or with another group. But when you come together, you catch up, you share news, and you reconnect at that wonderful intimate partnership level that you may have with just them, or if it's an open relationship, with certain other people where there's agreement about that. So that's what interdependency is. And it's the kind of space that we want to cultivate in a relationship. I think leading on from this, wanting to have your partner be everything and the modern world we live in, is what I call the too much information space, TMI. This is where you share everything and you want them to share everything. But not only do you want them to share everything, you're constantly checking on everything. So I have noticed, especially with the younger generations going into relationships, because of things like the smartphones that we have and the ability to have tracking, it is quite common that they will track where each other is. And they will say, oh, it's convenient, oh, it's for safety. So often, though, when we end up in the relationship arena, in the clinic space, it's causing them to have suspicion, and it's causing them to create questions. They're thinking, why has that person gone there? That wasn't in their schedule. They never told me they were there. I don't like the fact that they went there. Or they turned their tracking off on their phone. That must mean they're up to something. It's creating this suspicious information. Leading on from that, which I think is something that for me, I just can't get my head around, but I know for some people this is part of their relationship. It's the having access to each other's personal information, having access to each other's social media accounts, expecting to know who your partner is following. I've had conversations with people where huge jealousy has been caused because one of them in the partnership is looking at pictures on one of the social media platforms and the other person feels threatened. Now, these might be pictures of somebody that's completely unavailable, that doesn't live in this country, and yet it's causing difficulty in the relationship because they're looking at other people that they may have some kind of attraction to. They may not be interacting in that in any way. So is this any different to when you would have somebody, perhaps like to look through certain magazines, or perhaps they would enjoy, you would talk about fancying somebody, from movies or on the screen, but because you can choose to look at these particular profiles, it's causing this jealousy. And you have to stop and think and say, what's going on there? Are they behaving in a way that's outside of your rules of engagement? Is this behavior that you've agreed you won't do? Or are you creating tension in a relationship where actually there's no tension needed to be had? So I do really think this whole thing about tracking each other, sharing what you're looking at, needing to know, approving and disapproving almost of what your partner is viewing or not viewing. And I ask couples, or more so all the time, did you actually talk about this before this became an issue? Have you got a rules of engagement process in place? Did you say what was okay for you and what wasn't? Again, with a whole new episode coming up where we talk about what it takes to maybe open a relationship, but also what it takes to have a healthy closed relationship where you're really clear on the boundaries. Because so often these issues come up and cause problems, but there's never been a conversation that says, I'm uncomfortable if you use social media to look at people that you might find physically attractive. I don't want you interacting in that way. Maybe also you don't want in the same way, maybe you're comfortable with your partner looking at pornography, but maybe you're not. But it maybe doesn't become an issue until you find out that that's what they're doing. So I think there's this need to know what everyone's doing all the time, that it's really it's really causing an issue in relationships. And it's important to think about what your boundaries are. Think about why you need to know this. Think about why it causes you to feel uncomfortable or insecure, because that's what it is. It's creating a feeling of insecurity. So how do you cultivate that healthy space in your relationships? Well, I talk a lot, as I've said, about these rules of engagement. And this is what is important to have when we're at the beginning of a relationship. When you're in that lovely, exciting phase that I talked about at the beginning of the episode, what's equally important is to step back and think, what is important to me in terms of my behaviours and your behaviours? How can I allow this person to understand perhaps what my belief system is, what my morals are, what my values are, and what behaviours will enhance that, and what behaviours will I find difficult to deal with? And remember that they may have a whole complete different set of values, morals, and beliefs. And it's down to you two or more to work together and decide if that is compatible. It's not okay to assume that they have the same behaviours and beliefs as you. It's not okay for you to assume that they will understand why you're upset further on down the line if you haven't talked about this. You may be surprised at what other behaviours people have and what they feel is appropriate or not appropriate. And this is why it's so important. So having a think about your relationship and these behaviours that are causing problems. We've got the over-dependency. We've got this tracking. We've got this anxiety. We've got this lack of boundaries, lack of barriers. There's too much information going on in your world. Another big thing that I think causes a lot of issue and conflict is almost when you do the opposite. It's when you withdraw. You withdraw from the relationship because you are punishing your partner. So how does this occur? You may stop talking to your partner. We're not talking at the moment. You may insist they sleep somewhere else. They're not in the bed tonight because they've upset me. You may withdraw physically, or, you know, we're not having sex because I'm not very happy with them. And this sort of punishment, just for me, creates an avenue where it's difficult to have repair and rupture. When things happen, we get annoyed. When things happen, we get upset. Your partner is going to do things that annoy you and upset you. And that is part of life. And it is quite normal for you to feel like you might not be ready to have a healthy discussion. But when people move into what tends to be habitual behaviors, these tend to be their go-to behaviors, then actually what you're doing is you're not trying to fix it, you're punishing your partner. Now, I agree, there might be things that are extreme where you say, what they did was just so outside of what we agree in our relationship that I can't have them in my space. You know, I am not ready to go there. I'm talking about people that habitually do this. We haven't spoken for the last 3 days because we had a row, or I've been sleeping on the sofa for 2 or 3 nights because we had a row, you know, or they won't be intimate with me. They won't allow me to move into their space. And it's really important to think, what are you gaining by doing this behavior, this withdrawal and this punishment? You're wanting to, I guess, let them know that you're unhappy, but you're not allowing them to redress that. You're not allowing them to engage in what could be different or what could be changed. You're continuing with the rupture, but there is no space here for repair. And rupture and repair, you'll get to know, is one of my, most favorite things to talk about because it's so vital in relationships. So have you got habits in your relationship that are causing you to have issue when perhaps there isn't? When you feel that need to withdraw from your partner, think about why you're doing that. Do you actually want to heal? Do you want them to hear you? Do you want them to acknowledge that you're hurt and upset? I would say most of the time the answer is yes. And that isn't going to happen because you've exiled them to the spare room, or you won't have sex with them for 3 weeks, or you're not going to talk to them. You're going to turn your back on them. That isn't helping with the repair. It's okay to say, I need a bit of space. It's okay to say, I can't have that conversation today. But think about how you can change those behaviors, because those behaviors, just like the being right in each other's face behaviors with the no boundaries, it's a seesaw which isn't giving you any balance in your relationships. So I want you to think about, from this short segment today in this episode, what habits are you bringing into your relationship? Because it can really cause an issue where, as I've said, there's no issue to be had. And it's really important to talk about this with your partner. It's important to let them know how you're feeling. Remember, communication, clear communication is everything. And that is what we're looking for when we come together in session. So thank you for listening. We're here in the relationship arena. We're diving into all things relationship. I'm going to be back with more episodes, me talking about what happens in session, but I've also got some amazing guests coming up where we're looking at different types of relationships. We're looking at how we talk about relationships, people living relationships in their own way. If you'd like to be a guest, then why not get in touch? And also, if you've got a topic that you would love me to give my thoughts on, then also get in touch, because the relationship arena is a huge place, and relationships are everywhere in our lives. And I'm nosy and I want to talk about them all. So I'm wishing you well, and I'll see you here again soon, here in the relationship arena.